Welcome to the third episode of Why Conservation, where we talk about conservation on a local, state, federal, and even international level, and then we share with all of our local communities about how we can make a difference. And today, I actually have my next door neighbor on. She is a longtime retired science teacher, and she has a wealth of knowledge about conservation and sciences, and I'm so excited for her to be on here today. And so welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. We'll tell you what I can.
So tell us your name, the name of the organization that you were associated
Yes.
with, and how many years you taught there, and what got you interested in that field in the first place.
Oh, okay. All right. So my name is Malia Bergstrom, and I taught most recently at Fayette County High School. Taught there for 16 years in the sciences. I taught biology, environmental science way back in the day, and then AP biology, which includes a lot of systems thinking, things like that. And I became a biology major because when I went to a pretty selective university, I knew that my background in the humanities was nil because I had gone to a lesser school. So, but I thought I can learn science. I can keep up with people who, I haven't read Shakespeare, but I can figure out science. So that's how I ended up in science. I took a class and just loved my first year biology class, and then went from there and absolutely loved the subject. I kind of specialized in anatomy and physiology, but then I got much more interested in bigger systems and in the environment later on.
Cool.
So,
What role does the school system fill within the conservation space on a local, state, federal, and even on an international level?
well, obviously they're going to have much more a local to state level influence, but I think about the school system as a whole and then individual schools. Obviously, I was just involved at an individual school, although I had interaction with people in the school system level. So, first off, is just to model sustainability and things like that. But I think the school system in the sciences, and I worked with the science coordinators for the entire county, actually three of them, need to think about how they're going to encourage, write curriculum, create a space for teachers and students to really understand conservation. Even the selection of the required classes that kids have to take in high school. And actually, to my dismay, since I left 2 years ago, they have far fewer kids are going to be taking regular environmental science. The AP kids will, that's expanding, but for the kids who may not have a lot of exposure to that just in their home lives, I really wish they were doing a little bit more of that, but for reasons unbeknownst to me, they're not doing as much. But it comes into the regular biology required curriculum. So anyway, the county or the district level needs to really work on, okay, what's our curriculum plan from grade school on? How often are we going to bring this into the scope and sequence? How's it going to be reviewed again and again? Because ideas just have to be, seeds planted and then cultivated as they get a little bit older and able to understand. And then, of course, it culminates with what are we going to require kids to know in high school, and what are we going to test, and how important is that? So that's a part of it. Also, just funding for special projects. I think that's a hugely important thing because it's not all just done in the classroom. It needs to be done in giving kids opportunity for everything from science fair to conservation clubs and things like that. So on a system level, that's the way they're involved in conservation. When you get to, I can only speak to high school, although I do know of some people who on the grade school and middle school level has done some real creative things with like getting kids out in the dirt in gardens, and we've done this here in the county with elementary school gardens, with conservation projects, just simple little things, but to get kids outdoors, because unfortunately in the current culture, for all kinds of reasons, kids aren't outdoors very much. So that's something I've been happy to see, and I think our system is trying to fund, although it always takes an advocate. And if there's not an advocate, programs die. You've got to have somebody, and they're a lot of work, and they take a lot of creativity to do that. But in the high school level, again, just I wanted to advocate for let's require kids to have this kind of exposure. You want effective teaching in and coordinated teaching in biology, in environmental science, trying to put a lot of kids into AP, environmental science kids who can do it. And but more than the classroom, it's like Green Club or I know at Fayette County High School they're trying to revamp the greenhouse and give kids actual experience in growing plants because a lot of kids haven't. They haven't seen a farm. They don't know how things work. Even things like, and then of course, just sustainable practices in the school are real important. Just modeling good behavior, recycling, and I wish they would do more in terms of less disposables. But it's going to take a strong movement because systems for cleanliness and kitchens and all the rest are just set up for disposal.
Right.
And I wish they'd go back to the melamine trays that we had to do and they had to put in the dishwasher and that
remember
kind of
those?
thing.
Yeah. COVID changed a lot.
Yeah,
Yep.
it did.
Okay, so for the next question, what does conservation mean to you personally?
Why is it important? Well, I'm sitting looking out through this plate window here at trees, and I love green. I love trees. I love vistas. The big view, rivers, mountains. I'm more than that than even beaches. But I just want God's green earth to keep being that way for me, for my kids, my grandkids, and for generations to come. I mean, we've only got this one earth. That is it. And I think we have tended to be myopic and not think about systems, not think about huge things that interact and affect each other. And we just look at little tiny things and so it's really important to me that, we be able to breathe, for heaven's sakes. That's what conservation's about.
Right.
Breathing, not only the aesthetics, that's the first thing that draws me into it, but then it says, okay, now what does this mean? I am breathing if we're not doing this, and just want to keep the world beautiful and functioning. And that's what conservation is, yeah.
And why is conservation really important at this moment in history?
Well, I think we're kind of at a tipping point. We are getting to a point of no return in terms of, obviously, carbon, all the things that human impact has on global temperatures and oceans and the viability of the soil and so many things. So I think because you get to this sort of, exponential thing, it goes up, it rises, and suddenly it starts growing exponentially, the problems, the troubles, and then we're in deep sewage.
Right.
And so I think it's a tipping point, and we cannot wait, and I'm not going to live to see the repair, I don't think, but I hope it starts, and I hope it starts soon.
So you have lived in this area for a really long time, and I would love to get your perspective about what is a positive thing that you've seen in conservation or as far as working for environmental protection that you've seen over the years.
And not just this area, but just what I've observed in the U.S. I've lived in other places as well, but when I think back to the 60s, 70s, early 80s, we have come a long way in terms of reducing water and air pollution. Rivers stank. Raw sewage was going into rivers, into the Great Lakes. There were just places you couldn't be around. There were dead zones, and air pollution. Just even driving into Atlanta. Before there were so many people, you still had this smog, and even worse I lived in the Chicago area, in Cleveland, the Rust Belt, just the amount of pollution in the air, the visible pollution and things like that. So we've improved water quality in most places. There are obviously, I think, Mississippi and Flint and all kinds of places where there are delivery issues, but we kind of rolled back the clock a little bit on water, just severe destruction of water, and we're doing better with acid rain and things like that. So I mean, what I can see and smell is a lot better now than it was when I was little. When you went into a city, I grew up kind of in a rural area, so I wasn't affected by a lot of it. I didn't realize. So I mean, I think that's an improvement. I think people think about it more. There are, especially we're in a suburb. There's a lot more thought about what trees you can cut down, and their codes. You go out into a little more rural areas. I've had some experience in Alabama, and it's like I don't care about anything. Cut it down. Whatever. In a lot of places, so that's a problem. But I think we're thinking a little bit more about it. It's a little bit more in the public consciousness. I mean, you can't walk around without hearing about global warming or about issues related to climate and or even plastics, things like that. You hear a lot more about it now. Obviously, there's this backlash, which is really worrisome, and there's the much bigger societal problem of people not trusting experts, not believing science, and that's huge, and that's going to be huge in so many areas. So that's a real concern.
What's a negative thing that you've seen over
Well,
the years?
In addition to just the cumulative damage that we've done, there's just a whole way of life, a cultural mindset that is for convenience and mobility. So the use of disposable things, the use of plastics, it's just culture. Even if you don't want to, it is very, very, very difficult to. I mean, you can't go. I mean, I when I was young, we got milk delivered in glass bottles, which we used those glass bottles, put them back out there. They were washed and returned. And you bought a soft drink in glass, and then you got a deposit back when you put it. And so now there are issues with glass and making it, but it was at least reused. There's issues with washing and transport. So I recognize that there are trade-offs, that the easy thing is not necessarily, or the obvious, oh, we could do this, is not necessarily. We got to count the cost, but the whole mindset and the pace of life lends itself to that, prepared dinner, the Keurig cup, and that's a small thing. But I mean, even the plastic garbage bags, for heaven's sakes, and people aren't gardening as much. They aren't composting. They aren't even cooking dinner. Right? So they're eating out, they're driving places. I mean, it's just a whole lifestyle. Okay, so my husband grew up in a community of probably 90 miles from downtown Chicago, and probably 250,000 people. The population is very close to the same as it was when he was growing up. And you used to get off the expressway and could drive a long way and just see a little restaurant here, or something here, there, a store here or there. But now it's just strip malls and restaurants and stores and more restaurants and more variations on things. It's like it's the same number of people. So what does it say? Okay, we're eating out more, we are driving more. Stores used to be sort of confined to the downtown area. Now they just keep going out and spreading out, and so there's a whole culture that consumes. It is consumerism. It's my right to, and convenience and having what I want, when I want it, where I want it, is very expensive to our environment and to our souls. So that worries me.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. I remember, when you're talking about composting and stuff like that, when started composting here, the amount of trash was reduced to, I think I maybe fill 1 bag a week of all of the things. And it was an interesting thing when you said about plastic, the trash bags themselves are plastic, right? I use recycled ones, but it's still plastic, right? And just like to think about like, well, I'm putting it into the trash can, but that's also a plastic bag. And that's even something that I didn't think about until you just said it.
Yeah.
But like the thought about like how like the amount of waste just with like food, even if you're cooking and being mindful,
Yeah,
you still
yeah.
have a lot of left
Sure,
over.
sure, yeah.
And that also fills up the trash can, and like how much it was reduced just by composting is insane. And I think about that when I roll out my garbage can and my one bag is in there from the entire 7-day week. And it's like, wow, such a difference.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's great.
Are there any other concerns that you have in regards to like conservation in the environment that you would like to share?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. I mean, individual, I mean, I'm not composting yet. My husband is going, his promise to build a, we're going to do this. He's now retired, and so I hope we'll do this. But so there are a lot of individual things that you're doing, I'm trying to, I mean, of all ridiculous things. I make yogurt rather than buying the plastic things. I make bread rather than buying things in plastic bags. There's all kinds of little things that we do. I got, not a grind my coffee, whatever it might be, rather than single serve, and, try to avoid it. But in reality, what the individuals who choose to do something can do is pretty small, because, I mean, and we should be doing it and we should be encouraging, but there's a couple things. One, it's expensive. That's a middle to upper middle class thing. You know what I'm saying? To be able to buy things in recycled, packaging or special packaging, or go to stores that will let you buy in bulk. I mean, you got to get there, and they're expensive. I buy, shampoo bars and soap. I mean, like I have them mailed to me. I mean, world of Amazon, or things that use less plastic, but ultimately that's a lot more expensive than what somebody's buying at Walmart.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you have middle to lower income people, I mean, that's an unbelievable burden on them to have the time to compost, to have the space to compost. I mean, if you live in an apartment building, you're
Right.
not, unless you buy one of those fancy,
$600, I think, is less
composters, which will probably do two individuals composting. I
right.
mean, I'm saying it's not going to work for a larger family and all
Sure.
the rest. Yeah. So, and just the way kids have been raised to eat out a lot, fast food, which has all the disposables. I mean, you can go and eat at a green restaurant and pay a lot of money, if you live in certain Tony areas, right? But it is not easy to do, to ask people as individuals to make those big changes. So I think a lot of it has to be systemic. Other cultural issues is, one cultural issue is our idea about public transportation. One, it is not available where you and I live because the county voted it out when they had opportunities to hook into MARTA, 30, 40 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, however long it was. So there's not a culture of public transportation. People don't even know how to use it if you live out here, right? And there have to be huge cultural and systemic changes. Some of those cultural changes will come through education, through social pressure, but again, it's easy to have social pressure in the groups that already are thinking about it, okay? Wealthier, more liberal thinking, or more educated people, okay, yeah, they can put social pressure on each other. But when you get out of those little enclaves, there's not a force of social pressure that says, oh, you really ought not to be doing this. Or why don't you try this? It's not modeled. It's not there. You didn't grow up with it. So we got to admit, there has to be huge cultural change.
Sure.
And I don't know exactly how that happens. Some of it is governmental. if you make rules, I mean, just think about car mileage and what has happened, just the rules. Oh, no, it's going to come to the end of the world if we increase the mileage record. And they have, but of course, so have the price of cars gone up. And that could be a good thing if people were using public transportation. But, oh, wait, you may have to wait 30 years until there is reasonable public transportation right now. Okay,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's too expensive for you to buy a car, but what are you going to, then how do you get to work? I mean, there are huge geographical and government issues that need to be addressed. But some of it's a mindset that some things are going to have to be done by the government because individuals can't. I guess I'm saying
Sure.
putting guilt onto people who don't have the means to live green. It's just like organic food. It's, oh, great, it might be better for your health, but who can buy it? And you can't feed the world right now organically because of choices of how we live, like meat and Western diet and things like that. So I hope that there's not something cataclysmic that has to happen that totally changes our culture, but it may happen.
Yeah.
Evolution, okay? Things happen. And but we now have the ability to kind of predict what might happen, and I hope that we steer clear of those cataclysmic things. But it's going to take change, and it's going to take support from institutions, particularly governments, to make it happen on a large enough scale to make a difference. Which is not to say that individuals should not be doing all the things that they can, but I don't think heaping guilt on people who cannot afford it is the right way to do it, and I don't know how we do it. So.
Sure. What are some ways that you actually practice environmental awareness and conservation within your personal life?
Well, I get out into nature, one. And so then when you're out there, when you love it, you take care of what you love, right? So in our yard, we don't have grass in our yard. We have what grows there. Now, it looks green and we mow it. You've mowed it for us. Thank you. And so, but it's just like little tiny, there is some grassiest things. But so just leaving, when it comes up as, I don't know if they're little violets, I don't know what it is, whatever it
Violets
grows.
and I think clovers over there.
Clover
So
and violets. So in the spring, it's just full of little bees and other things. Little pollinators are there.
Yeah.
Using minimal things like Roundup sometimes, but basically only on the grass. Only on the pine straw. Sometimes my husband will do that. But trying to think about native plants, things like that. Just getting rid of single-use plastics as much as I can. There again, it's like things that are ecologically friendly, like those little silicone bags. How come one of them costs $10? You've got to be kidding me. But,
Right.
Buying those kinds of things rather than using disposable plastic bags. And, we keep the air conditioning temperature high, 78, the heating cool.
Yep.
Try not to, energy efficient driving as much as we can, things like that. So just those little things. Make a lot of things myself. I really try to avoid. You cannot avoid. I don't even come close to avoiding plastics.
Right.
But if I can, make my own of this, that, or the other that I use regularly, and avoid buying those things that only come in plastics. Even it's a silly little thing, but that half and half, I'm only buying it in the cardboard carton as opposed to the plastic ones when it's there. But then sometimes it's not.
Right.
But I'm not in a. I did I did tweet to. I love. Oh, what kind is it? A certain brand of Talenti double dark chocolate ice cream, but it only comes in a plastic container. Now, mind you, a little container like this. So I have used them. When I was teaching, all those things were used for. I used them all the time. I left the whole little cabinet of those tops. But finally, I said, I emailed them. I tweeted about how I can't use it anymore because I can't use any more of these plastics. I mean, this is ridiculous. Find another way. Put it in cardboard. And so I don't buy it anymore. It's a little thing, but and
Yeah.
it doesn't. Most of the things I've described, in truth, don't aren't too difficult for me. So I don't know what sacrifices. I don't know if I'm making severe sacrifices, but I do contribute to conservation organizations. I have buy, what do you call them, carbon offsets when you fly and things like that. But I don't know how much.
Right. Yeah. Because that's a big data set that we'll probably never see about like how much are we making the difference. But I know that like the things that we do in our individual homes lessen the impact of what's around. Because like what I think about for us too is how we're in this cul-de-sac and we're in the watershed that goes down to the lake right here, right? And I also don't use anything on the lawns, nor do I try and control what grows there, except for like when it's like coming up the house or going into like the flowers I do want to keep. But like we get all of the runoff, and I think about what is also in that runoff and how can I not contribute to it
Yeah.
any more than it's already in there, or how can I help make it better, and keeping like all of the pathways for the water like clear, because I know that the ground does filter some, and then just reducing all of those things, it's
Yeah.
kind of like, because our habitats that we're creating affects our neighbors over
Yeah,
here,
absolutely. Yeah.
over there, like it's when you talk about system, like it all interacts. Yeah, so fascinating. Well, that's it.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
So
It was
I
very nice to be here and to talk about it and to think about it. I'm glad to have to kind of summarize my thinking about it. 'Cause
yeah.
since I'm not teaching it anymore, it's nice to kind of, okay, come back, think about it,
Yeah,
Put
so
it
much
all-
knowledge in that
yeah,
brain. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
put it together.
So I thank you for coming on here.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much, and this
Thank you for having
contributes
me.
so much for what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do for the world. So
That's great.
thank you.
Good. Thank you.
And see.